makes all the world of a difference, because it's not as though this is Control Warrior that has tons of armor that they can gain over the course of the matchup. If Rogue gets ahead in the early to mid game and then closes out with Alexstrasza and some Wicked Stabs, that is definitely a winnable position. Looks like lambyseries has decided on Oops as the side of his cushion that he's displaying here.
And much to Raven's chagrin, doesn't appear to have neatly made his bed, but does appear to have cleaned himself up very nicely, as it's been a little while since we've even seen lambyseries on stream. He went 0-2 in both of the Specialist weeks, and then of course we had Masters Tour Orgrimmar in the middle, but glad to finally see him back on display here in APAC Grandmasters, because he's definitely a favourite of you and I think, at least in terms of players to talk to and to see in action.
Oh, for sure. He's just so savvy with social media and just how to be a cool guy. I can testify for that, having gone to several after parties where Lamby was also there, and he just seems to liven up every room he is in, even though he doesn't necessarily make the beds of every room he is in. He has kept the stage dive in the matchup, which, again, I talk about how important card draw is for Rush Warrior in general, and he had the opportunity to potentially corrupt both of them by coining out Bumper Car, for example, but that the coin can be very, very useful in this matchup to get down an earlier run thack, or Troublemaker, which oftentimes just closes out any chance for Rogue coming back.
Right, and the problem here is, of course, that by going for the Bumper Car here, he wouldn't actually even corrupt the stage dives, because they count as 2 mana in terms of corrupt effect when the Cult Neophyte is in place. So instead going for the ETC just because it has 1 extra health, I think is actually very smart on this turn. He can then just follow up with the Bumper Car, play a stage dive as well in addition to that, and he's setting up for some powerful plays, especially with the pickup of conditioning. This hand is coming together very nicely.
Yep, even though that Cult Neophyte served way above average disruption in this matchup, because Warrior doesn't play that many spells to begin with, the fact that Lamby has conditioning and the immediate generation of those tokens from the Bumper Car means that he's in no bad spot whatsoever, just waiting for turn 5 to roll around so he can get the +2/+2 all across these minions. GivePLZ, however, has now picked up Efficient Octobot. You always like to see that, and he's not seen any conditioning just yet, or even run thack to potentially buff something from hand. So I was looking at the potential for just playing it this turn. It's a weak to 10th Thrasher, but other than that, it's likely to get proc.
I agree. I was honestly even thinking of just going for the play of the Orc Merchant immediately, because essentially you're working with either 3 mana on a Secret Passage or 5 mana on a Secret Passage next turn, because then you would get the guaranteed reduction in cost there. And I actually thought that was a big enough difference to delay on the Secret Passage, because the difference between hitting Kazakus or not hitting Kazakus is huge. Being able to play Swindle plus a 2-drop is a big deal as well. And it does mean here that GivePLZ doesn't get much value off the passage and is left completely high and dry in terms of the card draw.
I will say that my play of just Octobot was probably bad because there was just a stage dive played, so there were additional breakpoints to beat that. Right. But I agree that he could have just gone immediately Aug Merchant and maybe made things a bit more palatable when he eventually runs into field contact. As it happens, the Cult Neophyte does a whole load of nothing with her last turn because Lamby gets to just play this Sword Eater on curve, and then the conditioning will come down undisrupted next turn. For GivePLZ, it's just a matter of whether he wants to, I guess, potentially step the man crick if he thinks he's in a bad enough spot where he really wants to get the now nerfed 3/7 man crick Consumed by Hatred out as soon as possible.
Yeah, just taking the low tempo play, doesn't even want to play the Octobot, because I think, as you said, he knows pretty much guaranteed that some way is going to be able to be there to clear it off, given that there's been a stage dive, likely a conditioning or a run thack on this turn as well.
Crab Rider, yet another card that has been met by the Nerf Hammer. As we know, it only has Wind Fury for the turn it is played instead of just permanently, but I think to Rush Warrior that is not a huge deal because they're not reliant on buffing that one singular card the way that Aggro Paladin is, but it still is relevant in terms of just putting a clock on the Rogue.
I don't even know how you're supposed to go about this. There's 100% board clears available here with stepping the Prize Plunderer to be able to get double activation off of that. But is that any kind of a win condition? I'm thinking at this point, do you just have to say my next card is field contact and act like that's the only chance you have to get back in the game?
Yeah, I do think it is somewhere along those lines, and so I'm okay with him going for a partial clear, maybe just on the Rokara and then leaving up the 3-6 so that he still has battle cries in hand to potentially combo off of field contact. That exactly is what GivePLZ is going for, even though he has to float mana at the end of this. His really only out is that field contact, and we're already seeing, like, even though this was a below average rogue draw and an above average rush warrior draw, even if it had gone into field contact, I think Lamby still has plenty of resources to beat that.
Yeah, lambyseries has the option here to get in the Tent Trasher alongside the bumper car, obviously, because it has another minion tag that goes alongside the Tent Trasher. But honestly, I was wondering if that was even better than just getting down a Dark Moon Rider as a 3-3, because that's already been buffed. But either way, it's absurd amounts of damage on the board. Even with Crab Rider losing Wind Fury at the end of this turn, it still needs to be a miracle for GivePLZ, but he does get the field contact. This is what he's set up for as the one draw to keep him in the game.
He's doing the thing. However, he's playing a list with no brooms, so it is much harder to come back on board. He has this one prize Plunderer, which he can shadow step, but at the moment, only 3 cards played, so it's Crab Rider, 4 cards played, and then 5 with the shadow step, so he can try and beat this Sword Eater. But the fact that the 10th Thrasher can stick around is absolutely enormous.
He could go for stepping the Orc Merchant to play Brain Freeze after activating his own Octobot here, which, yeah, does feel worth it, because just denying damage here so you're not straight up dead to Alexstrasza is a big deal.
Yeah, it also gives him one more draw in the grand scheme of things. Not that Alex was immediately available this turn, but Troublemaker is still on the mind for sure. And he has built a board where it's not the greatest shape for Troublemaker to come into, but I think it's still fine for Lamby if he just, takes down the field contact, and even if the Troublemaker heads into the 1-3 Divine Shield or the 2-1-2-1s, it's fine, they're still value trades.
Yep, going for the Troublemaker I think is definitely the way to go, because you still get the guaranteed clear on the field contact, which is really what you're looking for on this turn.
Is just far too many stats for GivePLZ to overcome. We're looking for Miracle Wand Thieves at the moment, and with 7 mana to play with, I'm not quite sure. Even Flame Strike doesn't deal with the 8th 10, although Flame Strike's probably the best he's got.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm looking for ways that you can try and cheese a win with Alexstrasza. If you can get Shadow Step off the top to go with your Tenwu, or if you can then go like Alexstrasza, step it, and then double activation next turn, but he's just going to be dead before that's even a possibility. So going for the Tenwu here, a necessity, but not one that you're happy with.
Yeah, I think just trying to get a chance at maybe Cone of Cold, a way to freeze the board and survive another turn. It is just not coming together though. Prize Plunderer not able to deal with the Troublemaker, not even close.
Yeah, it's just not enough.
If he goes Foxy Prize, then he can kill the Thrasher at least, right?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not offering anything better, but neither is GivePLZ. He just throws it down there. He realized just nothing doing there, just going to be dead over the next couple turns because the Troublemaker is too much. And we haven't seen all too much Rush Warrior recently, with the Specialist format being the premier one, but it's just doing its job there. That is the best matchup for it in the metagame, it feels like, at the moment, and we saw a very common pan out of the game there.
Yes, indeed. The large stats from the Rush Warrior just could not be stopped from turn 5 onward. The conditioning was far too much for Rogue to overcome, and from GivePLZ, he did have the Octobot, but none of the big payoff cards to go along with it. The field contact came a bit late. There was no early Jandis, no early Kazakus, and those cards are pretty necessary to give the Rogue any teeth in the matchup, because after the conditioning comes down, they just cannot beat the sheer amount of power that the Rush Warrior is putting on board every single turn, and that is going to be true in the next game as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think that for GivePLZ, the kind of game plan he went for of just going wide with the field contact can work if the warrior has a slightly weaker early game and does not have Samuro. It's a lot of checks that you have to get there, but it's a possible win condition. But very different matchup now for GivePLZ on Token Druid. And I think of all like the tempo matchups versus Token Druid, be it Miracle Rogue, Rush Warrior, or Paladin, Rush Warrior is kind of in a bit of a weird spot because obviously it can have the ability to play all these rush minions to fight back against the board, but I think it struggles to actually get enough of a board presence before turn 5 a lot of the time, especially now that Crab Rider has been nerfed, to the point where one big Glowfly swarm on turn 5 can actually just blow out the game, even against a deck with so much rush capability.
Right, even though it seems counterintuitive to say the deck that runs minions that can blow up boards the turn they're played is not actually all that favored against a deck that relies on having minions stick, like Token Druid. It's very true, because the Rush Warrior can only play generally 2 minions max per turn, at least relevant minions, by the time the Gibberlings come online. And so it's also a very big deal that Glowfly Swarm kind of conflicts with the turn that the Rush Warrior wants to play the conditioning. And if they take the 2 mana to play conditioning, they're not necessarily dealing with the entire board. So I feel that this is a matchup where the mulligan for Rush Warrior changes quite a bit. You'd probably end up keeping things like Parade Leader and more often the Warmaul Challenger. Just get those on board, Rakara absolutely premium, and try to maybe pressure the Druid, if not build a board that can trade well by the time the Glowfly Swarms come down.
That's exactly it. You don't want to be faffing about wasting your mana in the early turns, as is often correct to do as Warrior to set up for a more powerful play later on. You want to get these tempo plays down, which is exactly what lambyseries is gearing up for here. Athletic Studies almost always a keep, and as you said, the Warmaul Challenger, just a nice way to fight back against these boards at the same time.
Another bumper card he probably doesn't mind as well. The thing is, the mana becomes quite awkward because he wants to go for discounted card and not float one next turn, so it might even be the Sky Talon.
I was honestly looking at that just to go for perfect mana efficiency. At the same time, though, it could potentially be that he just floats a mana here, or just hero powers here, sorry, because he wants to go for Runthak on 3, at which point bumper cards have 2 attack, and then they can actually effectively answer the treants that will come down on the other side. So I like this line from Lamby.
Yeah, I definitely see that. If you are going to take the bumper card, then saving the discount for the Runthak makes a whole lot of sense. He just has a curve now. Warmaul into Runthak, into Ringmaster Watley. Probably don't get the freedom to go Watley if the Druid has drawn any kind of board generation, but for GivePLZ, it is only Thorngrowth Sentries at the moment, which is far from ideal. He's also just not got card draw.
Yeah, he's got nothing. As soon as he picks up a Gibberling, obviously he has a monstrous board, a Glowfly monstrous board once again, but he's got to get it, and he is going to be running out of time because lambyseries is putting on the pressure really, really fast.
And GivePLZ, thankfully for him, he at least has this Lunar Eclipse to be able to clear the Runthak, because if not, Lamby was going to get so far out of control in terms of the board pressure that he could develop. However, what is GivePLZ doing with the rest of this turn? Is it going to be just the Marsul and buff that board and say, this has got to get there?
You could go Marsul, Coin Bloom, and then Lunar, Solar, Pride's Fury. You're only buffing 3 minions. But it does give them +2, +6. At the same time, though, it might be a more valid game plan to say, I have to draw a board generator in the next couple turns and save your buffs for that instead. It's a really big breakpoint here.
It's really tough, especially since the Lunar still would require a trade from one minion or the hero power in order to actually kill the Runthak. But GivePLZ is saying, I have to make do with the best I've got. He already knows that Lamby has buffed a bunch of minions in hand, so he is not going to wait any longer, and he is going to go all in on this right now.
Yeah, going for the line I was the line I was talking about. It sets up for Soul of the Forest next turn with the Innovate as well, and of course it means that with plenty of card draw still in the deck, GivePLZ is not necessarily all in on this play, but it definitely feels that way, and a good answer from lambyseries could turn this around very quickly.
Granted, it's hard to answer these 3/7s, but okay, Samuro, honestly not that great against this current board state. There is Oh, it did get stage dive, but still a little bit short of being to trade off against the 4 health minions. It's all right, though. Lamby just needs to stay at parity at this point because GivePLZ has used so many resources on only 3 minions. And we could see him go for Soul of the Forest here. I don't think the Power of the Wild really changes breakpoints in terms of trading because he still has to send 2 minions into the Sword Eater, so I kind of prefer the Soul.
Agreed. Would you go innovate nature studies first just to see what you get? I'm wondering if there are any things that would change your turn here. Lunar Eclipse, maybe, but that's about it.
Or Pride's Fury, you might think about over Soul of the Forest. Yeah, it's probably worth it. As long as he starts innervate.
Yes, of course.
GivePLZ is going to hold all together. Sometimes having that mana flexibility from nature studies matters if he gets like fungal off the top. So he says it's not worth, or there's probably nothing he'd rather do than Soul of the Forest with that mana anyway.
Right, so there are many, many possibilities now. The main question here is it time to pull the trigger on the trump card of Samuro, or do you want to save it for another turn?
The Samuro can be played with a bumper card, and that would leave only a 2/2 on the board by that point, right?
Yep, correct.
So I thought it was, worth thinking about, but actually Lamby can also go about it in such a way where he leaves just a 3/4 on the board, which is effectively the same. Quantity matters more than quality for Token Druid in this matchup. And yeah, he can still save that Samuro, so I definitely like the line.
And so here for GivePLZ, I think, again, it's a case of, as we saw in the previous game, where he had to assume that the field contact was the next card in his deck, you have to assume that the next card is either card draw or arbor up, or you are just out of the game. And so picking the Solar Eclipse here, I think, is very, very smart. It plays to the best possible draw in the deck. And it's not likely to work out, obviously, as lambyseries, I think, can just mop this up fairly easily. But it's the best play for sure.
If he wants, he can even ignore it for a while with the Sword Eater and just play other minions. If he still values the Samuro that highly. Claw Machine? A bit expensive.
Yeah, Rusty here is pretty sick, right? Just does 5 immediate damage. That's pretty cheap as well.
And he can just play the riders on the board, even if they're not threatening that much pressure. They make it such that he spent the mana already on trading tools next turn, and GivePLZ doesn't play any type of board sweeps.
There's none to play in Druid. That's all you're going to get. But guess the way, again, he plays for the best possible top deck, and he's rewarded with it 2 games in a row. Maybe not the best possible, but way up there, just because it's some form of card draw. And he now does get to activate it twice. Correct on the first choice here.
Likely to be correct on the second as well, but misses it. That's pretty unlucky, but at least he can play the Fungal Fortunes.
Yeah, looking to dodge the Gibberlings, of course, because he needs every single card drawn possible. And Glowfly Innovate Soul of the Forest is available next turn. And even then, it's starting to look too slow.
Well, the one consolation for GivePLZ is that he's not actually under all that much pressure. Lamby played a run back, but not conditioning just yet. And this is looking to be a relatively slower turn from Lamby. He's taking the time to draw off of the Watley. And because this is already the second Sword Eater in hand, he's only getting the 1 draw. He also had the 2 bumper cards. It's a slow Watley, but it's still just like the most attack that isn't Samuro he could have played that turn, so it's fine.
Yeah, GivePLZ can now deduce this to be exactly a dragon. He doesn't know if it's the Tentrasher or the Alexstrasza, but I don't think there's all too much that you could do with that information, honestly. You just have to go all in as possible on the board here. And to be fair, it does mean that he is alive, even if that's Alexstrasza, right? Because it's only 9 + 8, which doesn't equal lethal here.
Right.
So it's just the correct play to go for this here.
Oh, this conditioning is huge. Even if he hadn't drawn it, Lamby can still mop the majority of this up with the Samuro, which is all that really matters. He just wants to be safe against the worst case scenario of Solar into Arbor up. And threaten the counter lethal while he's at it. But this is just the cherry on top. This is just a gazillion tokens now up to 3-3 and the Samuro to boot. There is just no way GivePLZ can come back from this, and you can see it from his expression.
Yep. With a cherry on top as the Samuro as well, just to completely clear this up. It's tough. It's rough game for GivePLZ. I do think that lambyseries played this excellently. I think like the hero power on 2, setting up for an early Lord Runthak, and then also getting saving the Samuro for the perfect opportunity in case of the refill from GivePLZ. lambyseries just clearly knows this matchup inside and out.
Sorry, the alignment gets me every time.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Even if he got Cenarion Ward into like some miracle 8-drop like Troublemaker, there's just not the shape of board that he is equipped to deal with. The Arbor Ups are far too late from being effective here. Although he can go for this last-ditch taunt into Arbor Up effort, I guess.
I mean,
adorable infestation.
He's literally just dead, isn't he, with the axe coming into play next turn? I think even if he trades here into one of the 1-3s, there has to be a way to gain lethal for Lamby.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the 10th Thrasher or Alexstrasza in hand, he knows he is just dead. And so that's Lamby going up 2-0 with the Rush Warrior. We talked about how if you can win an unfavorable in LHS, you are very favored to win 3-0 from that point. This is absolutely true now, although it is still debatable as to whether Demon Hunter is truly unfavored against Rush Warrior.
Much more like it from Mr. Chad Pitt himself, lambyseries, just dominating here with the Rush Warrior. A deck that I think will be very interesting to talk about in comparison to Control Warrior as we go forward to tomorrow, because with Bank Yugi having gone through to, having won his match earlier today against Shaxi, it means that all 4 players that have brought Control Warrior have gone through to the quarterfinals. And lambyseries repping here the Rush Warrior makes it look like a very viable alternative if you want to include Warrior in your overall strategy. So maybe just bringing Warrior full stop was the smart inclusion to play this week.
Maybe if you did expect a fair bit of Miracle Rogue, that is a very strong counter queue into that deck. And I think there is quite a bit of Miracle Rogue in the field, only a few people choosing the Weapon Rogue, even though I thought that LHS might give Weapon Rogue even more reason to be played, as it does have very polarized matchups and is a solid counter queue, given that people don't necessarily want to be running Weapon Destruction in their decks. GivePLZ last remaining deck is the OTK Demon Hunter, which I think the consensus is that Rush Warrior is favored in the matchup, but I have seen plenty an OTK Demon Hunter draw that doesn't even make it look close. If you are able to get the Skull and discount the perfect cards, Rush Warrior isn't necessarily fast enough to deal lethal before they get OTK'd in the head.
Yeah, we tested this matchup quite extensively a few weeks ago at this point, and I, playing mostly the Warrior in that matchup, came across like a few interesting conclusions, because my initial instinct, I think, was still correct, that you just want to go for maximum pressure, curve out with as much damage as possible at the start, looking for things like Parade Leader, Runthak to buff up, obviously all the usual tempo things. There were a couple of tricks that I think worked pretty well, like rank 1 conditioning was something I did fairly often and actually felt pretty good about it, just because a lot of the time, you know, giving +1/+1 to all your minions on turns 3, 4, and 5 is more important than going for even bigger minions on turn 5 or 6, because a lot of the time you're dead on turn 7, 8, 9 anyway. So the extra buffage, the extra stats you get from rank 2 conditioning sometimes just didn't feel worth it to me.
That's true. And it's also a matchup where I completely agree with keeping Ringmaster Watley to make sure that you have that additional fuel going. What's surprising to me is Lamby tossing Rokara, which I think is a very strong card in the matchup, because you're able to make threats out of these small minions like the Bumper Car and the Warmaul Challenger sticking. And Demon Hunter definitely doesn't want to spend their premium removal on one attack minion. So I thought Rokara is potentially a way to punish that.
I agree. I think Rokara is very, very good against the uninteractive decks. And, you know, while I was saying that conditioning rank 1 is powerful, when you have a curve as strong as this, I absolutely do not begrudge lambyseries for going for it at all. Just going Warmaul Challenger, Coin Watley, and then conditioning, in this instance, I do agree, is the more powerful sequence.
I find that the conditioning rank 1 is powerful for the kinds of hands where you have Playmaker Parade Leader, where getting them up to 4 HP out of range of I-Beam / the hero power with Chaos Strike or Eldrazi Warblades is not enough to deal with it. But you're right, this situation for Lamby, he can absolutely afford to wait. He can get many buffs on a bunch of cards and force it in such a way that even if GivePLZ has that first talented Arcanist with Immolation Aura, he immediately has big minions to follow up and force GivePLZ to have the second piece of removal.
Yep, I quite like as well going for not going for the Warmal Challenger on this turn, just because that is a card that benefits a lot from rank 2 conditioning upgrade to get up to 3 attack, a 3/12. Very, very difficult for Demon Hunter to deal with, kind of similar to old school Mankrik Enraged at that point in terms of its survivability.
And this is starting to get scary for GivePLZ. lambyseries has completely loaded up. His axe is going to recharge soon, and then so many minions going to get the benefit from this conditioning. So for GivePLZ, it's all about assembling the pieces for a big removal, namely that next Immolation Aura. Problem is, if he wants to outcast the Spectral Sight, he has to toss the 0-cost Moarg, which he already got the discount from the Fell Screamer, so it's not going to like roll over into the next Moarg he gets. It's very expensive.
And so instead, would you ever consider like just a bridge turn here where you go for like, well, I was going to say Arcanist plus I-Beam, something like that on this turn, just to pass the time basically, heal up a little bit and clear some of the board to set up for trying to hit Skull next turn off of the Illidari Studies. But instead, GivePLZ rips it here and also draws Skull right off of the top. So while there are a couple of draws that allow him to just play Skull next turn, it's kind of looking like these may be trapped for a while, which is heartbreaking.
That's a disaster. I definitely agreed with like Chaos Strike just to be able to clear off that 3/5. I think the Arcanist is a bit too valuable to dump in this situation because he knows a huge board is coming in the near future and he needs that to pair with Immolation Aura. I was just surprised to see the Illidari Studies because that's kind of a way to rip Skull next turn. And have it played in the outcast position. We can see now, though, that GivePLZ needs a miracle or else he's going to play full cost Skull.
Yeah, I think instead here you're just looking at very possibly I-Beam to clear off the Parade Leader, which is very nice to stop a lot of the attack coming in. And then, of course, setting up for Skull in, I guess, 1 turn's time if you want to go for Arcanist as well, even though it's massive overkill here, obviously, just because it allows you to go for the Skull next turn, which is so crucial.
Yeah, this is all so awkward. I think GivePLZ ends up on it because dumping Moarg and the Arcanist in the, Augmercian in the first place kind of indicates that he's already kind of all in and trying to get the Skull because it was already overheal. So I'm of the opinion that he should just double down and get the Skull in outcast position next turn. And if his deck is kind enough to him that he can and Lamby is going to feel pretty comfortable restocking the board, just as long as he doesn't use all of his resources, which he can't with the amount of mana he has.
Yeah, I did just have to double check on the card there when he didn't go for the order of Arcanist and then I-Beam. I was like, wait, can you save the spell damage for next turn? But no, it's not the way it works, or that would be absolutely insane. But yeah, I think just, as you said, setting up for the Skull, way too important. And to be fair, these minions on board do something, at least. They might absorb some attack and keep GivePLZ alive for a little bit longer. But the name of the game now for lambyseries is quite clearly absolute pedal to the metal. Go as fast as you can, as much damage on the board as you can. And the Playmaker here absolutely affords him that possibility.
Yeah, no shortage of resources. I will say that the additional 1/1s he gets are probably irrelevant at this point because they're not buffed by conditioning, but it's nice to have that little bit of flexibility just in case. His hand space is still very workable, and all he is doing is making it such that GivePLZ needs to hit the perfect Immolation Aura off of the Skull to survive. Okay, that's some spell damage. Not good. Not good. No chance to play Immolation. Excellent maneuvering.
That's just it. It's over. lambyseries in the most perfect snapshot of him as a person, wearing a suit, looking incredibly dapper, with an unmade bed in the background and dabbing on camera. That is, I think, the perfect encapsulation of who lambyseries is as a person, and also just dominating his opponent at Hearthstone. That feels like a return to form.
I have to eat my words about saying how cool Lamby is because he's still dabbing in 2021. But you know what, Dark? I think he kind of pulls it off. He absolutely deserved it after having these bad runs in the Specialist weeks, bringing a solid lineup, playing it very solid. Granted, he did get, very good Rush Warrior draws, but he did optimize in those situations, like we were saying, saving the discount for the run pack on the previous game and just not going for the rank 1 conditioning because his hand kind of suited him better to a rank 2 in this situation.
Yeah.
And I have to say, tough going for GivePLZ because